People describe their lives as a story, as one long narrative from start to finish, from birth to death. Every event, every pause, every slight nuance is just part of one long narrative, and they will write their memoirs and it will be one long narrative of interest all the way through. But I don't think it is. I believe life is just a series of short anecdotes held together by periods like tenuous little lines. These periods, it's like chapters being the anecdote and paragraphs being the thing that links them together. When we think of our life, we automatically think back to events. We automatically think back to events that had some meaning, set us in a direction, gave us thought, formed our opinions. And even then, as those events, as those anecdotes disappear back into the mists of time, they form their own narrative, don't they? You look back, you stand with a friend you've known all your life and you've shared all these stories with, you've shared all these times with, and it's been fantastic, and that is what's created the bond between you, a bond. I only have two mates who were very, very close, and they're both gone now, but we had a bond. And one of them died quite early, died 20 years ago, and the other one died 5 years ago. And he moved away in the last 20 years of his life, moved abroad. But we still had that bond. When he came back and we met for a pint, we still told the tales of our youth, the times when we had such fun as children, as 9 and 10-year-olds, being little ragamuffins, causing trouble everywhere. But when I told the story and he told the story, they were slightly different because we had our own anecdotes. Because as time goes by, you interpret those memories differently, don't you? That time you ran through the streets, kicking over walls, beating up old ladies, stealing their bicycles, having such fun. You didn't. You just skipped down the street and said hello to Mrs. Smith next door. But over time it's turned into a thrilling anecdote, something that maps your life. When you read a memoir, it isn't a continuous narrative, and memoir is a series of anecdotes held together by something, by some narrative that keeps you interested in the basic theme, in the basic narrative. Little short stories of things that happened in your life. Because most of us go through life in a very mundane fashion. I do. I get up and I walk the dog, little Molly, and we go home, we have breakfast. If I've done some recording, I will edit that, go to the shop, do some cleaning, go out again in the afternoon, do a little hobby in the evening, perhaps have a glass of wine, go to bed, rinse and repeat. But within that, there will be occasions. I will have that heart attack. I will have that blown out tyre at 80 miles an hour at 10 o'clock at night on the highest motorway point in the UK, in pitch black, howling wind, horizontal rain with lorries flying past at 80 miles an hour, ripping the door out of my hand, Molly in the passenger seat, shaking and scared, and we were there for hours until the AA came and rescued us. And that happened the night before last. And that is an anecdote, but that is an anecdote that I've just told accurately because it's fresh in my mind. But if I relate that anecdote again in 12 months, it will change slightly. The wind will be higher, the rain will be harder, the lorries will be faster, Molly will be doing cartwheels in the back seat of the car, and it changes. But it's still the basic narrative, it's still the same story of our lives, The ones that when we tell it with a friend over years, it differs slightly. And when you tell it and you're with your friend and they tell it and you notice the differences, you notice that it's not quite the same as yours, you don't mind. You don't question it because you know what's happened. You know that that's his recollection. He's gone through that moment in time with you, that 10 minutes, half an hour, whatever, and he's taken experiences from it and he's cherry-picked the things in that narrative that were more significant to him or her. And that's how he relates it, and that's how it is in his memory, and that's how he will tell it in a memoir. Life is just a series of anecdotes. And I think that's better than it being a long narrative, isn't it? It's more fun. It's a novelette. Rather than a great big tome of 600 pages, rather than War and Peace, it's just a little 80-page novelette that is made up of short anecdotes of a page or two, held together by little paragraphs that link them. Little paragraphs. A paragraph that fills the time, that describes your life between anecdotes, isn't it? The anecdote takes the time because that's the interesting bit. That's the bit you want to tell everybody. And then the mundane bits are the paragraph in between that you don't relate because you know that you will probably lose the reader's attention. Life. Just an anecdote. An anecdote itself, the very word anecdote, when I say it, it evokes light, non-threatening, amusing, interesting little tales. Anecdote. It comes off the tongue as anecdote. It leaps, it bounces off the tongue. I'm going to tell you an anecdote. And you know that that anecdote, the chances are, it won't be scary, it won't be. It'll be non-threatening, it will be interesting. This is the one where you put your pint on the table in front of you, lean your elbows on the table with your chin in your hands and prepare to be amused by the anecdote. And that's how it should be. Life should be a series of anecdotes, shouldn't it? And we should store those anecdotes away in a little hard drive of our mind so that we can pull them up. We can go to Google and go, anecdote, beep, 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 and it comes up and this tale comes up and you remember it, and I remember things now. Of course I do. I remember things from right back when I was a kid. But when I think of these things, when I think of being a kid, I don't think of the times I sat in front of the television. I don't think of the times when I walked backwards and forwards to school or went shopping with my mum. I remember them, but they're just links. They describe the framework of my life. They describe the framework, and they're necessary and they need to be there and they need to be spoken about in context to join the anecdotes together. But the anecdotes I remember being a kid, a 5-year-old, sitting on the side of the road on the path outside the house with my friend. Keith. I was dressed as a cowboy. He was dressed as an Indian, because you could do in those days, with an headdress on with feathers, because you could. Because nobody got offended. And we sat there and it was a hot summer afternoon, and I can remember looking down and picking hot tarmac from between the cobblestones of the street. I remember the buses, the double-decker buses going past in the middle of winter, and they were blue, not red. No, they weren't, they were red. And they used to have a hole at the back where people got on and off, and in that hole, that's where the stairs were to go up, and there was a little shelf, a little hole, where the bus conductor could keep his gear, his sandwiches and his flask and his little thing that he printed the tickets off. And I remember throwing a snowball, because that's what we used to wait till they came back and throw snowballs into the hall where people went up and down. And I remember throwing a snowball and the door of this little cupboard thing was open, and the snowball disappeared inside it, and we all leapt up and thought it was the most amusing, great thing going. And I remember that because it's an anecdote. It's something that imprinted itself on my memory. And we all have those times. We have bad anecdotes, but then we don't actually think of those as anecdotes, do we? I think we automatically think of anecdotes as being those amusing stories in our lives that we want to tell people. And there are things in our life that we don't want to tell people that are private and we want to keep to ourselves. And I don't think we call those anecdotes. Those are just occurrences, bad memories, things that happened. Things you don't particularly want to relate, but you know they're there and they're a chapter in your life and you think about them, but they aren't things you want to share readily. But sometimes in life you have to. But we don't think of them as anecdotes, do we? Because anecdotes are uplifting and funny. Do you remember when? I remember then. Let me tell you about this that happened to me. Oh! And we've coloured them a bit, haven't we? We've made them rosy. We've made them slightly more amusing. But nobody cares, because when you tell somebody an anecdote, we all know that it's been dressed up a little bit like a pantomime dame. We know this, but we don't care because we all like listening to anecdotes. We've all got a tale. Sometimes when people talk about themselves, you get bored because they tend to be bragging or proud or trying to be better than you. But an anecdote isn't anything like that. An anecdote is just a tale. It might be poking fun at yourself, and it generally is. They're like stories of things that have not that much consequence, not that dramatic. Just, do you remember when? Do you remember that bloke doing? Do you remember seeing that when that bloke did that and we all had a good laugh? Do you remember being in the pub and all falling over drunk? And then you join those together with the odd mundane paragraph. But that mundane paragraph is necessary to bind the whole thing together. To bind the whole thing together. And without anecdotes, without life's anecdotes, where would we be? Without fond memories, without little stories to tell, where would we be? What would life be worth? What would be the point if we came out here, did our do every day, and then it just passed into history, and then we moved on to the next thing without any memory, without anything to go back to, without anything to think about, without when times are hard, without stories to tell, if we just kind of did it like robots and we didn't have a memory, it was just going from one thing to another. Life was only the future without anecdotes to tell. Not somewhere I want to be. Oh, look at this. Let me just show you this. The snowdrops are out. Spring is just around the corner. I love seeing the snowdrops. They're all there and they're covered in little sparkly jewels of moisture, because I think we had a little bit of rain last night. Here's another lot, and there will be thousands of those all around this area, around the trees. Oh, I love it. Spring is sprung, and I've just showed you the snowdrops, but that isn't an anecdote. That's just something that happened. Now, if I'd have gone over to look at the snowdrops, put my foot down a rabbit hole and broke my ankle and ended up in hospital for 15 hours, that would be an anecdote. And that doesn't sound very amusing. But as time goes by, once my foot had healed, once the initial pain had gone, once it was dulled a bit, even by this afternoon, it would have become an anecdote because I would have been able to raise a smile. And I did put my foot down a rabbit hole many years ago. And I remember, and I've told this tale about working with this lad, Norman, who was a local kneecapping specialist, but a very nice lad to boot. And I put my foot down a hole. and I broke my ankle. And as I lay on the ground, he just stood over me, looking down at my face and going, "You've gone yellow. No, you've gone green. No, you've gone blue." As the colour of my face changed under the pain. And that was an anecdote. And I threw a pickaxe handle. He was in the back of a Land Rover sorting the gear, and he was a dangerous man, and he was a big man, and he was a scary man. And we were clearing up in the evening, and I threw a pickaxe handle from about 20 feet away, just meaning for it to fall at the back. And he was in the back of the Land Rover, and it went into the back of the Land Rover and started bouncing off the walls of the sides of the Land Rover. And he was like down on his bent over, crouched over with his hands over his head as this, and I was like, "Oh my God." And then he came running out, and he genuinely wanted to kill me. That was an anecdote. It was probably a bit scary at the time, but now I can smile at it. And it being an anecdote, I could spread that story out and make it last 10 minutes. I could embellish it. I could embellish it with things that weren't actually true, weren't things that actually happened, but they're relevant to the story. They don't change the narrative, they don't change the truth, they just colour it a little bit, they just dress it up a little bit, and that's absolutely fine, because that's what we all do with anecdotes. So whenever you read someone's memoir, just remember that that's just how they remembered it. It wasn't necessarily exactly like that. But when you tell an anecdote, it wants to be interesting. You want the other person to smile, and you want the memory of that anecdote to make you smile. And that's all life is. That's all life is. From the first time we can actually store memories away that we can pull up later in life. Stories I've got from 50 years ago, stories I've got from when I was 5 that I can now pull up 66 years later and remember quite vividly. Since we're old enough for our minds to be able to do that, our life starts being just a series of anecdotes, a series of little stories. And I know this because my subscribers tell me things and describe things, and they're anecdotal. Most of them are just tales that they know are true, or are true in their memory, and we trust them to be true. They cannot be proved. You cannot give anecdotal evidence in a trial, because you've no proof behind it. It's just a story that you've come up with. It may be true, may not be. And when you tell an anecdote in company, the person who's listening knows that it may be true, it may not be. But if it's amusing to listen to, then what the hell? We're all loving it. We're all sitting there with a glass of beer, or a glass of wine, or a cup of tea, sitting on the couch, or sitting in the pub, or sitting in the bar, or sitting outside on a table with a coffee, Euro maxing to the max, and somebody in our company tells an anecdote, and we all smile, and we nod, and we go, "Yeah, we don't know if it's true, it's just a tale, but we don't mind because it's amused us." Life is just a series of anecdotes. When we tell our stories, when we tell our anecdotes, we're not just telling a series of stories that may or may not be true, but we know they are, but they're slightly embellished. We aren't just doing that, we are actually giving meaning to our life. We're giving meaning. We are painting ourselves in an image that we would like other people to acknowledge and other people to approve of, and we're telling it truthfully, but just a couple of embellishments, like buying a car and then putting a red stripe down the side. It's the same car, but somebody out there who's got absolutely no taste at all may think it looks better. And that's what life is, a series of anecdotes. And that's fine, because anecdotes, the anecdotes of your life, are just a metaphor for humanity. It's a beautiful morning. It's very still, it's cool, Molly's loving it. I'm loving it. I woke up in a very good mood this morning, and I'm going to enjoy the day. And at some point in that day, a couple of narratives may form. A couple of things that might happen that I can go, that was amusing. I can't wait to tell somebody about that. And when I tell them, it will be anecdotal. They may believe me, they may not, but they won't stop me telling the tale. They won't disapprove, they won't criticise, they will nod along, knowing that it may not be 100% true, but it's nice to hear anecdotes. It's nice to hear tales of daring do and people's experiences and how they came out of it in the end, all fresh and happy and unscarred, and able to tell the tale to some random person they meet out with a dog on a cool, still, overcast, early February morning. And may we all collect many more anecdotes over our time here. Because when we're gone, the anecdotes go with us. And that's just as it should be. And we shall see you all on the flip. Peace and love.